The Bills' opponents are preparing to take on Josh Allen and company this coming fall. What are the states of their rosters, and how do the Bills match up against them as things stand today? We are starting a brand new series here on Buffalo Live. Hello everyone and welcome to Buffalo Live, your one-stop shop for live professional play-by-play reaction to every Buffalo Bills game, plus a preview into every opponent that the Bills will be playing this coming 2024 NFL season. I'm your host, Kyle. You're watching Buffalo Live, and we are starting a brand new series here, looking at all 13 teams that the Bills will be playing. The order of this series is going to look a little interesting. We will first take a look at last year's opponents and what the schedule was like last year. And then we'll shift into looking at what I will call the special opponents that the Bills will be taking on. So the Bills will be playing, obviously, the AFC East twice. The Bills will play the AFC South. The Bills will play the NFC West. And then there are three special opponents that the Bills will be playing. That's two conference teams and then one non-conference team. So for those special opponents this year, those are the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, so those are your two AFC teams, and then the Detroit Lions. So that's going to be the first part of this series, is glancing at last year, then looking at these three teams. Excuse me. And then we will do two parts on the AFC South. We will do two parts on the NFC West, and we'll close it out by doing two parts on the AFC East. And also, by the way, you can expect an instant reaction from me this Wednesday night when the Bills release their schedule. So, that is how this series is going to look. For today's episode, we are going to, again, look at last season, how well the Bills did, how they handled their schedule, and then we're going to take one of those three teams, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs in terms of those special opponents. So we'll be looking at we'll be doing a deep dive into the Kansas City Chiefs today. So, before we do that, let's look back. The Bills last year finished with a regular season record of 11-6. That was good for first in the AFC East, the number 2 seed in the AFC. They went on to lose in the divisional round to the Super Bowl champions. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. And then also the Bills had I want to mention this, a head-to-head tiebreaker with the Miami Dolphins. Had the same exact record, but the Bills were able to beat them twice and thus secured the tiebreaker over the Miami Dolphins. The splits last year. Now I want to look at the Bills' record compared to playing in Orchard Park versus playing on the road. So, 2023 record in Orchard Park. And this, by the way, excludes the home game that the Bills had in London. I don't count that as a home game because it was anything but a home game. If anything, if either team had a better advantage in that game, it was clearly the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had been there longer, and by the way, they have more fans in London than the Bills do. So I am counting that as a road game. So the 2023 record in Orchard Park, counting playoff games last year, was 8-2. This was the third best home record in the league behind just Dallas and Cleveland. The average scoring margin for the Bills was plus 12.9. That is massive. Think about that. That is 2 scores, almost 2 full touchdowns that the Bills were averaging in their games, not just victories, but all games played in Orchard Park. The only 2 losses that the Bills suffered in Orchard Park were against Denver and Kansas City in the divisional round, obviously. Now, I wanted to look at how this performance measured up against the Super Bowl champions, just because I was curious. Kansas City Chiefs, if you take a look at all their home games, and again, this excludes their one that they played in Germany against the Dolphins, they had an average scoring margin of 7.7 across all their games that they played at Arrowhead. So That is crazy. The Bills were averaging a final score, 5 points more of a final score difference in their games at home than the Chiefs were. So just an observation there. Now let's look at their record on the road. The Bills on the road, counting the Jacksonville game in London, were 4-5. Now that is average across the league. Obviously, they basically lost as many games as they won. Their average scoring margin in those games was actually plus 2.4. And Kansas City's average scoring margin on the road was 3.0, and that does not include the Super Bowl because that was a neutral site, obviously. So the Bills were slightly below Kansas City's scoring margin on the road. But I wanted to, again, bring up those Chiefs stats because this is further proof that the Bills aren't far behind the Super Bowl champs. So as much as we like to think that there's this enormous gap between the Bills and the Chiefs, the scoring metrics tell otherwise. So last year's opponents versus this year's. Last year, the Bills obviously played the AFC East twice. That's 6 games. They went 4-2. They lost once to the Jets. They lost once to the Patriots, which is ironic because you'd think they would have lost to the Dolphins at least once there. Not the case. They also played the AFC West. They went 3-1 in that span. This is a regular season. Only loss there coming against Denver. They played the NFC East. Again, went 3-1 against those opponents. Only loss there coming at Philadelphia. And as far as their other special opponents, they played the Jaguars, Buccaneers, and Bengals. And they went 1-2 in that span. So they lost to the Jaguars in London, beat the Buccaneers at home, and lost to the Bengals in Cincinnati. Okay, so there are your, there's what happened last year. This year, again, we are playing the AFC East twice, obviously, playing the AFC South. That's the Jags, Titans, at Houston, and at Indianapolis. They were the 4th best division last year, the 2nd best in the AFC, if you're just looking at wins and losses total. Then we're also playing the NFC West. That is the Arizona Cardinals, San Francisco 49ers, and we're at the Los Angeles Rams and then at the Seattle Seahawks. They were the 2nd best division last year in all of football. They were the best division in the NFC. And then again, your other opponents are the Chiefs, Ravens, and Lions. So, now that we've taken a broad overview of what happened last year and our opponents this year, let's dive in to the Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, whom the Bills will be playing at home this year. Sean McDermott's head coaching record against the Chiefs as head coach of the Buffalo Bills is 4-4. It's actually better than I thought it was. Thought it was going to be 3-5, something worse but he's won as many games against the Chiefs as he has lost. His record, or the Chiefs' record last year, was also 11-6, identical to the Bills. They were first in the AFC West. They were the number 3 seed in the AFC. Bills had that tiebreaker over them, and they obviously went on to win the Super Bowl. The last time these two teams matched up ended in a loss for the Bills, 27-24 in Orchard Park in that divisional round. All right, now here's where we get to the meat and potatoes of today's episode. Notable changes for this Chiefs team. We're going to start on offense. We're going to start with the skill players. I'm going to take a look at which players these teams lost, who they drafted, who they maybe acquired in a trade, or who they signed as a free agent. So, first of all, wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling saw his contract expired. He's still on the streets. He's still available for the Chiefs to sign if they want him. He only had 315 yards last season, so it's not like this guy was a huge contributor, but he was somewhat of a contributor. And not to mention, he did have 2 big plays against the Bills in the divisional round, had 62 yards total. So, to replace Valdes-Scantling, the Chiefs drafted in the first round wide receiver Xavier Willie out of Texas. He's got elite speed, definitely strong in his vertical routes or his crossers, crossing the field against man coverage especially. Weaknesses are play strength and his contested catch ability. So kind of a different player than MVS is. They also sign wide receiver Marquise Hollywood Brown to a 1-year deal worth $7 million. His strengths also are speed. His vertical routes, crossing the field against man. He does have a better route versatility than Worthy does at this point in their careers. Worthy hasn't played a down in the NFL yet. And also shares a common weakness of play strength. Both these guys have kind of thin frames. Worthy is a bit taller than Brown is, but definitely similar players in terms of very, very fast. The Chiefs sign Irv Smith, tight end, to a 1-year deal. He missed some games last year to a hamstring injury. Hasn't really had a good season since 2020. When I've thought of Irv Smith in the past, I definitely thought of a good player for the Vikings, for the Bengals, right? But he hasn't really been a super significant contributor to his teams in the passing game since 2020. So the Bills also draft tight end Jared Wiley out of TCU in the 3rd round. Now, these two additions at tight end really make you take a look at Travis Kelce, who is turning 35 in October this season. So you wonder what kind of decrease in production the Chiefs anticipate for Kelce this coming season. And I'll get into that a little bit later on as well. Offensive line-wise, they saw left tackle Donovan Smith's contract expire. He played 66% of snaps, battled injuries late in the season. He's still on the streets, available to sign for any team. And initially, you thought that this was a vote of confidence for second-year man Wanya Morris out of Oklahoma. However, the Chiefs go on to sign offensive tackle, and I'm going to butcher his last name here, Kingsley Suamataia, out of BYU in the 2nd round. And so then you start to think, well, maybe they don't have as much confidence in Morris as was previously led to believe. So those are all the notable changes in their offense. Now let's take a look at their defense. First of all, secondary. The Chiefs traded cornerback L'Jarius Sneed for a 2025 3rd rounder to the Tennessee Titans. Sneed played a team-high 91% of snaps on defense. So he's a huge, huge leader for this defense last year. Now the question becomes, who will take his place? I personally, just based on the statistics, believe that 3rd-year man cornerback Jaylen Watson will start. The Chiefs drafted him out of the 2nd round in 2022 from Washington State. He played 40% of the defensive snaps last year. And in that span, he collected 33 total tackles, 2 sacks, and 6 pass deflections. So, not a whole lot for a guy that, what can you expect? He only played 40% of the snaps, right? Now, it's either going to be Jaylen Watson or it could be cornerback Joshua Williams, who was drafted in the same year, but earlier in the 4th round. So they actually made a greater investment into Joshua Williams, 4th-round pick out of Fayetteville State, that's in North Carolina, and he only played 30% of the snaps last year on defense, only collected 18 tackles, and had 5 pass deflections. So if you're just basing, who you believe will start off of the statistics last year, then you're going to go with Jaylen Watson. Also, notable change for this defense was the loss of safety Mike Edwards. Now, it's not a huge loss, but this was a quality depth piece for this safety core last year, and he goes to the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills now have safety Mike Edwards. Edwards played in 57% of the snaps at safety last year. He came in for Brian Cook, who was their starter, who had an ankle injury. And then they also drafted in the 4th round safety Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. So those are your notable changes in the secondary. How about linebackers? They lose linebacker Willie Gay Jr. to free agency. He goes to the New Orleans Saints. Played 57% of the snaps. And it's really interesting how the Chiefs kind of rotated their linebacker core last year. They really had 4 guys that they rotated between, with Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquill, Willie Gay Jr., and then I'm missing someone else here. I can't think of his name. Leo Chenal, that's it. So they rotated those 4 guys. They all got a decent amount of snap share. I think Bolton missed some time due to injury, but 4 decent linebackers there. And so the question becomes, does this rotation drop to 3 now with Willie Gay Jr. leaving, or do they try to mix in another guy? So, and then just a note on their special teams, since this kind of does not apply, but this is a familiar name. The Chiefs did sign punter Matt Araiza to a 1-year deal, who, former Buffalo Bill, until some legal stuff went down, he was found not guilty. So now the Chiefs have a major weapon in Matt Araiza. Now, this is a guy who hasn't played an actual snap of football since, I guess, those preseason games. But before that, since his days in San Diego State, I think that was in 2022. So it's been a long time. But, figures to be a guy who the Chiefs will have on their roster and could be a weapon for them in the special teams game. And a note on Rashee Rice, right? Definitely some legal stuff mounting for him. Initially, I wasn't too concerned about it since it was just a car wreck. Maybe there was some racing going on. Was he driving? Was he not? They're still performing an investigation in there. But, this another assault comes out of, I believe it was Dallas. And so, according to NFL.com's James Palmer, this is all speculation. I really don't even want to report on this because the police are still investigating. The NFL is still investigating. But James Palmer at NFL.com expects for Rice to at least miss half the regular season due to suspension. So that could be a major loss for the Chiefs if that is indeed the case. All right, so those are all your notable changes. Now, I want to get into my summary of what I see from these Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, the Chiefs are dangerous. They added to their wide receiver room. Okay, despite the loss of MVS, they add Marquise Hollywood Brown. They add Xavier Worthy, and so what kind of wrinkle does that throw into an already dangerous offense with Patrick Mahomes? Now, they weren't as good last year statistically, but as long as Patrick Mahomes is in at quarterback, then they're going to make defensive coordinators shiver and really, really game plan hard. So Mahomes was 6th in yardage last year. He was 8th in touchdowns. He had the 4th most interceptions at 14. But again, still the best quarterback in the league. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So always dangerous on offense. You've got 2 guys on this defensive line that had 10-plus sacks last year, and that was also something that didn't really change for the Chiefs this offseason. Their defensive line is basically the same. They paid Chris Jones a ton of money. Charles Omenihu still comes in. Mike Dana still comes in. George Karlaftis on his rookie deal. So all those guys on the defensive line are still going to be the same. So where are your question marks? The question marks are, they start with Mahomes' blind side. Are they going to go with Kingsley Suamataia or Wanya Morris? How good are either of those guys going to be? Don't really know. Travis Kelce and his age had 350 fewer yards this past year compared to the year before and 7 fewer touchdowns. Now, he still had 984 yards. That's a lot, right? But what kind of regression will we see this year? Is he going to still be around that 1,000-yard mark, or is this the season where he kind of tapers down to a 600? He's not playing as many snaps, so who knows? Like I said, turns 35 this season. The Chiefs make further investments in their tight end room, so we'll see. Another question mark, again, Rashee Rice. How many games is he going to miss due to suspension? We shall see. Another question mark is Xavier Worthy's contributions. Can he reach the 900-yard mark that Rashee Rice did last year? Or is he kind of going to top off around where every other Kansas City wide receiver does, which is around 400 yards? We shall see. And those are your biggest question marks on offense. There's way more question marks on offense than defense. Defensively, it's truly just this L'Jarius Sneed absence. Is Jaylen Watson going to play, or is Joshua Williams going to play? And what kind of quality play will we see from either of those guys? What kind of regression will we see there? Because it's going to be some regression, I imagine. So, but that's Kansas City Chiefs, and so that's who this Buffalo Bills team will be taking on at some point. this season? Will it be early in the season? Will it be later? I kind of would like to see this game be played later towards the playoffs, but I know the NFL probably doesn't want those two games to be super close. If they do inevitably be in the playoffs, usually the NFL is scheduling these teams to be played, to play each other in the earlier in the season or mid-season. So we'll see. But that is going to do it for this edition of Buffalo Live. I feel like I flew through some information here at you. We're at the 20-minute mark, though. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and comment, how do you feel about this Kansas City Chiefs team? Where do you see their vulnerabilities are at? Where do you see their strengths, outside of the quarterback room, obviously? And what point of the season do you want to play them? Next video, we're going to be taking a look at the Ravens and Lions. Super excited about that. Again, be on the lookout for an instant reaction to the schedule drop. I'm super pumped for that. And if you enjoy what you see and you want to keep watching Buffalo Live, please do me a favor and subscribe to this channel. That would mean so much to me. Once again, I am your host, Kyle. You've been watching Buffalo Live. Thank you so much. Go Bills, and God bless.